Hi, I'm Andrea Lorenz from the East Grand Forks Campbell Library, and today I'm going to show you how to crochet a very simple mug cozy. Here's what you need. You will need a crochet hook, size G, or size H or G, either one works. H is what the pattern calls for. A button, a tapestry needle, which is a needle with a little bit bigger hole, scissors, and some worsted weight yarn. To start with, we're going to tie a slip knot at the end of our piece of yarn. So I like to do this by making a loop, looping the end around. So you've got a hole, like so, and then putting the end through that loop. That will make the slip knot, which you can see is just a square knot around both threads. So I'll do that again one more time so you can see. To make a loop, then put the end so it's around both of the threads, and then go through that extra loop that you made. Like so. So you're going to tighten your loop around your crochet hook. Not super tight, you want to have a little bit of give, a little bit of empty space. And what we're going to do is we're going to chain 41 stitches. So to do that, you're going to loop your yarn around your finger. I like to hold it like this so I can direct it with my pointer finger, but I still have a grip on it to control the tension with my other fingers. I'm going to do that, and then also with this hand, I'm going to grab onto the very end of the stitches that I'm working on. So this hand, my right hand, I'm holding the crochet hook with the hook facing me, or up, facing up, and I'm holding the yarn with my other hand. So I'm going to loop, make a loop, and catch the yarn with my hook, and then I'm going to pull it through that. So now I have one stitch on my chain. So I'm going to keep doing that. So I'm going to loop my yarn, catch it with my hook, and then pull it through. And you're going to do this one 41 times. You can count your stitches if you want to just go like I'm doing and not count, which is what I like to do. You can count by, you can see that each one of these little V shapes is a stitch. So right now I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 stitches. Alright, so I'm going to do this again one more time slowly. So I've got the yarn over my index finger, and then I'm grabbing onto it with my 3 other fingers, my middle ring and pinky finger. I'm holding on to the yarn that I'm stitching right here. I'm going to loop the yarn around, catch it with my crochet hook, and then pull it through that loop. So I still have one, so I always have one loop on my crochet hook. Alright? So let's make that chain. Okay, so I have my 41 stitches cast on or chained, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to start crocheting. So I'm going to turn the work is what it's called. We're going to turn, and then we're going to start crocheting into each stitch that we have done. And I'm going to give you a little pep talk right now. The first row is the hardest, so just keep going. So we're going to skip this very first stitch right after my loop, and we're going to stitch into this next one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my hook, I'm going to put it through both of the loops, so push it through one, and I'm going to push it through the other. So you can see I've got the two loops right there, that's one stitch, and then my original loop. I'm going to make one more loop, pull through that first stitch, so now I still have 2 loops, hook again, and pull through that. So that is a single crochet. And we're only going to be doing single crochets in this pattern, but I will show you how to do double and triple crochets. But I'm going to show you this again. So I'm not going to loop, I'm going to push my stitch, I'm going to push my needle through both loops of this stitch. So 1, 2. So it'll look like 2 pieces of yarn on the front, 1 on the back. I'm going to make a loop, catch that, I'm going to catch my yarn with my hook, pull it through once, so I still have two loops, and then I am going to pull it through, hook it and pull it through a second time. Okay, so we go inside, so I just put my hook right up and get through both little loops. I hook my yarn, pull through, hook my yarn, pull through. Alright, so you're going to do that all the way along the row until we get to the very end. So we're going to single crochet all the way down the chain. And again, the first row is the hardest. It's hard to get into those chain stitches sometime. You also want to make sure that when you are stitching, you're not pulling really tightly. If you pull, so if I did this and then I pulled my stitch really tight, it's going to be hard for me to get through this loop again, and then it will also be hard for me when I do my next row to get into each of those stitches. Alright, so just keep going all the way down your chain. Whew, the first row is done. Nothing but smooth sailing from here. Alright, so you want to make sure when you are crocheting that you don't get your piece twisted as you're working with it. So you want your V stitches to be up. And you want to make sure that it's okay. So this is, let me give you some hints if you happen to make a mistake or something. So before I say that, let's chain 1. So we're going to add 1 more stitch to the end. This is going to help us turn. So you're just going to chain 1, same thing that we did at the very beginning. And then we're going to single crochet into that next stitch. So we're going to skip this one that we just made, and we're going to crochet into this next one. So you're going to push your yarn through, or push your needle hook through. You're going to hook your yarn, pull it through, hook it again, pull it through. A single crochet, and you're going to do that all the way across the row. You're going to do this 5 times. So you're going to crochet all the way across, single crochet all the way across, chain 1, single crochet all the way across. I'm going to put a link to the pattern in the notes below so you can see it. So if you have, so let's do some troubleshooting. So if you happen to be crocheting along and you get a little overzealous and you lost, your hook fell out, that's fine. As long as you can find your loop, you just stick your hook right back through. If you get your yarn all tangled and something happens, or you accidentally like go through everything all at once, like maybe like this, you hook it and then you're pulling and you pull through everything and you're like, oh, that's not right and I can't even get it loose. Just take your hook out and you're going to pull that stitch out. Maybe. And you want to make sure then that you can find your loop, which here we go. All right, so you can see there's 2 loops here. I'm going to pull that out so I just have 1 loop left. And I'm going to put my hook back in there and I'm just going to do that stitch again. That's ripping it out. If you are unsatisfied with what you're working on, you can rip it out. Just pull those stitches back out and start over. As long as you can find your main loop, your first loop that connects to your yarn, you can always start from there. So if I was going to rip this out, I would just pull down back to my 1 loop. So I'm going to stick my hook back in there and go again. Yeah. So that's single crochet. So you're going to go ahead and go all the way across. The same way you did before, you want to make sure you get through both of those loops so that it looks both of the strings on the V. And your second row here should be a little bit easier to work. You should have a little bit more space between both of your loops. So make sure not to pull too terribly tight or it's going to make it very difficult for you. All right. Okay, so I've reached the end of my 5th row. My first row was the chain row. The second row was that first single crochet row, and then I have done single crochet rows back across. So what we're going to do now is we're going to make the loop for our button to catch on. So I finished this row, and I'm going to chain 16. And I'm going to turn my work, and I'm going to start back the other direction, starting with the last stitch that I worked before I started the chain. So you'll end up with a loop, a crocheted chain loop, and you'll just go back across using single crochet. That hooks the loop together. And you're going to complete, this is row 6, you're going to complete rows 6 through 10. Alright, so here is my finished crocheted coffee cozy or mug cozy. You can see that it is kind of twisty. It's getting a little spirally shaped. You can see that with my regular crocheting as well. If yours does that, that's fine. Don't worry about it. We're going to fix it in a couple minutes. But the first thing we want to do is we want to weave in our ends. So this is the end that we started with and the end that we finish with. Make sure to tie a little knot at the end of the yarn that you finished with so that it doesn't come unraveled. Alright, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to take my tapestry needle, which is just a needle with a really big hole, and I'm going to thread my ends of my yarn into the needle. And I'm going to weave these in. So I'm just going to kind of sew them in between some of the stitches. You can go in and out, up and down, whatever works for you. But we just want to get these to catch. So it is unlikely that our project will unravel itself. You don't have to do a ton, but it helps to do at least a little bit. And then you can cut off the excess. All right, I'm going to do the same thing with the other side. I like to go inside some of the stitches. Don't pull too hard or you're going to crinkle your corner. You want to make sure that you keep it relatively straight. But this is going to hide the yarn a little bit better, and it's also going to keep it inside. It'll keep it intact. It's good to go both ways, go one way and then to sew back the other way. Again, just to give your yarn a little more security. Alright, and I'm going to just trim this off. So if your yarn is curvy, it kind of curls up at the edges, or your project, what we can do is we can block it. And so in order to block it, what we're going to do is we're going to need a steam iron or an iron that can produce steam. So I'm going to preheat my iron. I'll be right back. While we're waiting for our iron to preheat, I do want to show you how to do some of the other crochet stitches. The concept is the same, you just do it a little bit differently. So to do a double crochet, instead of going immediately into my stitch, I'm going to wrap my yarn around my needle, and then I am going to go into my stitch. So I have three loops. I've got my first one that I started with, the one that I wrapped, and then this is that stitch. I'm going to hook my yarn again, and I'm going to go through the first loop, the next 2 loops, and then the last 2 loops. So that is a double crochet. Again, I loop the yarn around, I go through my stitch, hook the yarn, pull through the stitch, the next 2, the next 2. So you can see that this makes the stitches is longer. Then these are the single crochets here. This is the double crochet up here. So you loop, you go through your stitch, you hook your yarn, you pull through only the first stitch, then you go through 2, then you go through the last 2. To do a triple crochet, you do it the same way, you just loop twice. This one can be a little bit tricky because when you're looping, you got to play with your tension. You don't want to make your loops too tight because otherwise you wouldn't be able to go through them. So triple crochet, I have my 2 loops. I go through my stitch, I hook my yarn, I pull through the stitch, through the first 2 loops, through the second 2 loops, through the last 2 loops. So same thing, just makes it a little bit bigger. So you loop twice, through your stitch, hook your yarn, pull through once, pull through 2 loops, pull through 2 loops, pull through 2 loops. So, and this is how you can get different kinds of fancy crochet. I did a shawl pattern where we made shells, and what we did was lots of triple crochets all crocheted in the same stitch. So I'll show you what that looks like. So you can see that it's starting to kind of form a curved shape. But those are the basic things that you need to know to do crochet. Single crochet, chain, single crochet, double crochet, triple crochet. Alright, so the iron I have is not a steam iron. It is not great. A steam iron you can hold over and you push a button and steam will come out. And that is how you want to block anything that is acrylic yarn. It's going to keep it from curling. It will keep everything in place. If you are like me, you don't have a steam iron, you can very lightly block your piece using a wet cloth. So you put the wet cloth on top of your piece. You don't want to get it wet, but then you are going to just put your iron on and it's going to generate some steam. This is you can press, you don't have to, but this is going to have a very similar kind of effect. So you can see that it is, it's laying flat, it's not curling when I let go of the ends. You can do this also for your loop if you want your loop to lay flat, but you don't have to. So the next step is going to be sewing on the button. So in order to do that, you might want to test out and measure with a mug that you have. So I have my mug here, and I'm going to wrap my mug cozy around my mug. And this will help me to figure out where I need to sew my button. So it looks like my button needs to go right about here in order for this to fit well. Alright, so I'm going to kind of mark that spot with my finger. I have an extra piece of yarn left over from when I was when I was crocheting, I'm gonna thread that onto my tapestry needle. You do want to make sure that your button has a big enough buttonhole for the tapestry needle to go through. If you don't, that is also okay. You can just sew your button on with some regular thread and a smaller needle. All right, here we go. So I'm going to go up here through this, and I'm going to go through my button. I'm going to leave a tail on the back because I want to make sure that I can tie off. So I'm going to go through. I still have my little bit of a tail, and I'm going to tie these ends together right away so I don't accidentally pull through. So my button has 4 holes. I'm going to use them all just to make sure that this is doubly secure. So I'm going to go back through and go through these 2. And I might do that a couple times just to make sure the button is on nice and tight. Right. And then finally, I'm just going to tie these again on the back. You can weave these ends in if you so desire, but you don't have to. That is completely up to you. I'm just going to snip mine off because I don't think anyone's going to be seeing the inside of my mug cozy. And I'm going to put it on my mug.